Welcome to the GCN Tech Clinic, where we aim to answer your bike tech and maintenance related questions. As ever, you can submit your questions down below in the comments section using the hashtag askgcntech, and we'll do our best to answer as many of them as possible within the allotted time. This week, it's myself and Connor. So, first question, Connor.
So this one was sent in by Toasty Bear 1. Not quite a GCN Tech Clinic question, but I noticed today Pogacar is wearing a wristwatch during the big French bike ride. Even during the TT when he was wearing a skin suit. Is this just a sponsor thing? What is it? And how big a wattage cost is it? Well, we believe it's a Richard Mille wristwatch.
Richard Mille.
Richard Mille. Is that the French?
I believe
so. Yeah. So we found a tweet, an X. I'm not sure what you call them these days.
Richard 1000. Sounds really lame when you call it that.
But we reckon its value is at about 340,000.
What? Like
euros,
pounds, euros?
Euros.
Right.
It's a lot.
That's obscene, isn't it?
There's no reason for it.
You could buy an incredible house for that.
Yeah. It's just a watch.
I mean, people are into watches. Fair enough. That's what you're into. It's an obscene watch. It is a sponsorship thing. They sponsor the team. They sponsor a few athletes as well. We've seen Mark Cavendish wearing them. Also, Julian Alaphilippe has been known to wear Richard Mille watches. It is undoubtedly a slight aero penalty, but only a very slight one. I think you'd be able to measure it, I think, in the wind tunnel, but you're probably talking like a watt. I reckon it's not going to be much.
I reckon the biggest penalty would be a weight penalty.
Yeah, it's probably
it weighs a lot.
Probably quite dense, one of those watches. It is a sponsorship thing. I mean, he's that good. He can sort of get away with compromising his equipment a bit, because in that final Tour de France TT, he also didn't have overshoes on. And that was presumably for his shoe sponsor, DMT, to show off their fancy new laced up shoes in yellow. But it didn't seem to slow him down either, as he completely dominated the TT. So there you go. Next up is
Massimo Serafini,
who says, hey, Ollie and Xavier, thanks for your informative weekly videos. Question, I've been using 42 centimetre handlebars for the last 10 years and I'm considering going down to 38 centimetre bars as the trend for aero is gaining popularity. Will going to narrow bars affect the geometry of the bike and possibly impact my back and shoulders? Cheers.
I'd stick with the 42s personally.
Of course you would.
I'd say it depends what your riding is. Depends what you're looking to gain. Like, are you getting into racing? Are you trying to ride super fast? Maybe do some TTs on your road bike. If that's the case, then when I was racing, I went as narrow as I possibly could for aero reasons, but also actually for bike handling reasons. Because in a bunch, it's so much easier to go through gaps. You've got narrow handlebars. Yeah. It's such a big advantage, and you do notice it when you go wider that it is harder.
Yeah.
So I went as narrow as possible, but I think these days when I'm not riding my bike every single day, and I'm not able to be as supple and to be able to fit into that position, I think I do notice a narrow bar is a little bit more uncomfortable. Yeah,
I'd say it depends, especially on you and your body shape, because I was with one of my friends last week. It's called Alec. He's a bike fitter, and he was checking out the bars on my new Pinarello, which are sort of 36 on the hoods. And he was wondering if he should get that size, but I could instantly see when he got on there, he's got much broader shoulders than me. And so for me, it's nice, on those hoods in that 36 position. But for him, he just thought, no, a 38 would be better for him, because you can see the tension comes into the shoulders as he's having to force them in a bit. And so I think that's definitely part of it. How broad are you, and get someone to sort of have a look at that. The other thing is the question about, does it affect the geometry? Yeah, it does. So if you think back to trigonometry back in school, when that is the shortest distance. So if your arms are straight, that's the shortest distance from your shoulder to the handlebar. If you go out wider, you're changing that distance. It's the hypotenuse. It's the longer, you've changed it. So that then does affect the length of the reach as well. So that is something to consider as well in terms of your stem length. You might want to end up tweaking it if you do change the width of the bars significantly.
I also don't think it's just a case of going narrow and you become more aerodynamic, because also if you get your position wrong and you go to narrow bars, what can often happen is you almost like force your head up a bit more because you're not used to like, you have to kind of relax
your elbows
your
out.
head's in. Yeah, and it can like slow you down in other ways. So I don't think it's just quite as clear cut.
Yeah.
I hope that helped.
Yeah, it's just not as simple as people think. If you really are, there's quite a lot to consider, and a bike fitter can really help you.
Yeah.
Next question is from Riley Arimore, who says, my speed play pedals keep squeaking. After servicing the cleats and pedals, it goes away, but then comes back after about an hour of riding. Time to replace? Any tips? You don't ride speed play, do you?
I do.
Do you?
Yeah, I've never heard them squeak before.
They kind
out of memory.
I've done a video on how to service speed play pedals, so we can link that down below. They have a special grease gun tool for it to force the grease into the pedal, and they do benefit from routine servicing. The cleats often do start to squeak after a while when they've worn out, and they can benefit themselves from lubrication. They do actually recommend certain lubes that you can use on your cleats that definitely help. But if you are riding in frequently, watery conditions, then they can.
I often lube my cleats with speed play, just a dry lube really, just keeps them moving.
Yeah, keeps them quiet as well.
Yeah.
So it typically is a lubrication issue, and it can often, I think it will get noisier when your cleats start to wear out. Something that might be happening as well, which I have known, is that if there is a slight bit of play on the cleat interface with the shoe, that can cause a squeak as well. So if your cleats have become a bit loose on the base plate, especially if you're using adapters, that can cause a slight squeak there. So yeah, maybe just check that they are on tight and they're not moving ever so slightly, would be my other tip. Next question.
Yeah, so next one from Unicizo. With the new Aeroed out, I'm thinking about buying one yet again. Large, powerful riders would certainly benefit from their top-tier carbon CFR, but what about a smaller and less powerful rider? It stands to reason that somebody who weighs 60 kilos and makes 1,000 watts in a sprint doesn't need nearly as stiff a bike as someone who weighs 80 kilos and does 2,000. Save some serious cash and go for the CF SLX. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you can save a lot of cash. I mean, the Aero's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same shape. It's just where you notice it is there is a noticeable difference in ride feel. And if you are Jesper Philipsen and you are chucking out massive power, the extra stiffness is probably something that you would want. But I mean, for me personally, I don't really notice the stiffness as much. I'm not a big sprinter. My sprint is pathetic. But you do feel the ride feel. But having said that, I do know that when Sai did a video comparing the top tier Aeroed with the mid tier Aeroed, he actually preferred the ride feel of the mid tier one because it wasn't quite as stiff. He felt that it was a bit more of a comfortable ride. So in some instances, you might find that lower tier carbon frame set, you might actually prefer it. Yeah,
that's a very good point. Very good point. I think those like that top spec car, that it is a stiff bike. It's a very stiff bike. So based on your riding, where you're like doing the majority of your rides, you need to kind of base that off your decision too. Yeah, and I think at amateur level, it's very unlikely that the result of a race would come down to who was on. If you're talking a couple of 100 grams in weight and a slight difference in stiffness, because the Aero's the dominant thing and that's the same, it's unlikely that it's going to cost you a race result. Yeah, for sure. So, yeah. Hope that helps. Next one from Jacko Tuba. Yeah, he says, so do we know where the air between the tube and tyre goes on a tubeless tyre rim? Are there pixies in there that eat it? So that's why your tyres slowly deflate a bit over time. Yeah, the pixies have thrown me there. So basically, cars use tubeless technology as well. Most cars do on their tyres, and car tyres do lose air slightly over time, but they deflate much lower rate than a day-to-day nothing really. And
whereas bike tyres do tend to leak air a bit more. The biggest reason for this is an engineering thing, and it's that the car tyres use a solid metal bead on the tyre to hold them on to the metal wheel of the tyre. And that is a much tighter tolerance, so much so that you need a hydraulic press to get a car tyre onto a wheel. You don't do it at home, you take it to the shop where they do it when you buy your new tyres, specialist equipment. Whereas with bike tyres, you can get fixed bead tyres. They're not really sold much anymore. Everything has what's known as a folding bead. And as a result of the folding bead, it means that the tyre is much more easy to get on and off if you have a puncture at the side of the roadside, which is what you want. It means you can put them on and off at home. You don't need a press to get them on, which is kind of what you want. The compromise is that that bead is a lot less strong, which means that the air gap, the air tightness of that bead against the rim is not quite as good, which means you do leak a bit of air.
Get a bit of leakage. There you go.
So it's not Pixies. There you go.
Right, broccoli, on from Pixies to broccoli wobbles. If you could put movable flaps on your bike, would you do it? Like in F1 cars. Is there such a rule against it in the UCI rules? I'm going to be honest with you, I've never thought about putting movable flaps on my bike.
Add a downforce flap.
Yeah, personally, I don't think I need added downforce.
No, I mean, that's just going to create extra drag, and on a bike, you're typically trying to reduce drag as much as possible. Interesting idea. I mean, there is a thing whereby you might want some kind of flap in something like a team time trial or the team pursuit, whereby if you could have some device towards the rear of the bike which could increase the size of the wake to accommodate the drafting riders behind, and manipulating the shape of that wake behind a rider, that's an intriguing thing that could be designed to be beneficial.
In sprint trains?
Yeah, but at the moment, it would fall foul of the UCI rules, as it was most likely come under the thing of a fairing. And so, yeah, you wouldn't typically see that.
Flaps are out. Sorry, broccoli wobbles. Right, Mechanic 767. I find myself turning my wrist inwards when riding on the hoods. Would a narrower handlebar be better? Is it a position or fitness that needs to get better? Thanks in advance. I
think, going back to the previous question on the narrow handlebar, I think some people do sort of do that when they get onto the narrow handle. I think, you probably might feel that a narrower bar is better.
I did this a lot as well. I don't think it's like a major issue if you do bend your wrist inwards. What I found really comfortable is having just some slightly flared handlebars, getting me into a much more natural position.
Yeah, you might actually find, and this is also one of the reasons why people bend their shifter hoods in and angle their shifter hoods in a bit, because it does help with that sort of...
It's a more natural position on your hands. When you put your hands like that, it just does allow that more relaxed position.
Just be aware that, if the UCI has jurisdiction where you're riding, it could be illegal. There you go. Well, that's all we've got time for this week. So, thanks for your questions. And sorry if we didn't get around to answering your question. As ever, be persistent. Keep firing them down in the comment section below using the hashtag askgcntech. And hopefully we'll be able to answer it in a future episode.
Thanks for watching, everyone.
Bye.